What makes it hurt worse? What makes it hurt more is knowing what's going to happen to you, you know? There you are. They just come up to you and say, look, you made somebody mad. You made a big mistake, and now there's somebody doing time for it. There's nothing personal in it, you understand, but it just has to be done. Now get your hand out there.
Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock Blog, and I'm here with Joel Clark and Adam Balderstone for an episode of a show that we haven't given a name to yet, but we're going to talk about gangster movies. And today we're talking about the 1973 film The Friends of Eddie Coyle. This is a story of Eddie Coyle, a small-time member of the Irish mob in Boston, Massachusetts. It's considered one of the more authentic Boston-based films. Adam's been trying to get me to see this movie for a long time, so I finally watched it last night. We're gonna have a discussion, and yeah. So I don't know, Adam. Why don't you lead us in, since this was your recommendation? So
this is your fault, Balderstone. You tell them what it's about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he kind of gave an overview, but yeah, it's basically about the main character played by Robert Mitchum is been busted recently on a crime, and he's kind of got the dilemma of whether he should turn somebody in to try and get rid of his sentence or not, and it kind of spirals out from there. But I love this movie, but it's a very slow boil movie. I mean, it's a movie where you're literally like watching a bank robbery happen in real time.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It's like, which I love that. I love these things where the movie just lets you observe things. You're seeing something as what actually happened with no clever editing, just watching the events happen.
The suspense seems to be built on that, on watching things unfold. Like, okay, I got to wait for this guy to get in the lot and then park and find a space. It's all as if you're there and watching it. So it's like, and a lot of new movies don't do that. A lot of old movies don't do that as well. But this is one where, some movies benefit from a much slower pace. And I think this one, having that real time, let's watch the car park while we wait to see what happens. Works.
And you're watching what they're watching. You're like, oh, okay, he's checking out where the cameras are when he goes into the bank, blah blah blah. He's looking to see what time the bank manager leaves his house. It's like, so it's not telling you any of this, but as you're watching, you're like, oh yeah, it's letting you see what they're doing.
It seemed to be. Go ahead, Joel. Go ahead.
This movie wants you to pay a lot of attention to it. And it doesn't give you a lot of reason to do that if you're spoiled with modern movies that like slam it all in your face. And it really, honestly, watching this movie kind of reminded me of some distaste I have for modern movies. I really feel like modern movies now, they're jangling the keys in front of your eyes. And this movie is like, sit down and pay attention, asshole. It's a very 1970s movie.
Yeah, it's funny because my nephews wanted me to watch Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl last night, which I'd never seen. So I watched that, and then I watched this. And it's like, you could not have a more clear contrast of a movie with just noise all the time and no connection whatsoever to reality. It's like, oh yeah, you can just sail a three-masted ship with just a guy with a steering wheel. One guy can take care of that whole ship. But it's like, then going to this movie, and it was quite a contrast.
No, and also it seemed really smart too. I looked a little bit into it. It looks like the book that it was based on was written by a Boston, I forget what he was, like a DA or somebody that was involved in policing in some way, or in prosecuting or something like that. And this movie does seem to be pretty informed. Like the steps that they take when they do the robbery all feel authentic. I don't know much about bank robberies, but it feels like here's the smart things the bank robbers do. Here's all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes with sentencing and that kind of thing. Obviously this is before 9/11, so there's a lot of differences. Like, policing works very differently now, but it just was. And also it's prescient, because a lot of the stuff that's going on in this movie is stuff that really came to a head in Massachusetts with Whitey Bulger. Do you know what I mean? So there's it's insightful because it comes out in the 70s and it kind of knows what's going on, and all that stuff that's going on is eventually going to lead to this big issue with the FBI and Whitey Bulger. So
Yeah,
Um,
it's been a while since I've read about this movie, but I seem to remember that something about Whitey Bulger actually influenced this movie
oh,
too.
okay, that
So
wouldn't
I don't
surprise
know
me.
the truth of that. I don't want to.
I don't
I vaguely recall that.
I don't know how far back he was active, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
But like but definitely this. I mean, it feels like it's in the realm of that stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because by the time I like he got arrested, I think in like the late '80s, and I was a kid. I was in high school by 1990, so I was young when all that stuff was
Yeah.
going on. But yeah, so I don't know what was your reaction to this movie, Joel? Was this your first time viewing it, or had you seen it before?
Why would I have ever seen this movie before?
I don't know. I
It's pretty obscure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
I'd never heard of it. Honestly, I had no idea what I was getting into with this
Okay.
movie. I never saw it before. I have seen movies like this before. Again, they kind of came out of the 60s and 70s where movies really, they seem to understand that you had paid a movie ticket admission price to
Yes.
sit down in a quiet, respectful theater to give your full attention to something that was on a giant silver screen. This movie feels like it would play really well in a theater under those conditions.
Yeah.
And I actually watched this with a few friends of mine. So I was like, oh, hey, I'm over with my friends. Good to go watch this movie. Oh, man. All of my friends are my age or younger, and they literally, in some cases, fell asleep watching it.
Oh, really?
I was enjoying it quite a bit.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is not, modern audiences are not used to a film like this.
This
It's all
movie,
about-
so I didn't realize it was that obscure because people have recommended it to me for a very long time. So
yeah,
I thought
it's
it
not
was
an unknown movie, but it's
But
I
then I
wouldn't
live
call
in
this anywhere
Boston.
near mainstream,
Yeah,
so.
I live in Boston though, so I would expect people around here, like they're probably on their
Yeah.
radar more than other people. But yeah, it had me at the scene when he's in the diner with when he orders the coffee and stuff. Just from that moment on, that was kind of when I was really. And he sits down and talks to the gun dealer. That's the scene that really kind of gets me.
All the
into it.
scenes with him talking to the gun dealer were complete gold. I love
Yeah.
the second time they meet, and he's like, "Look, here's my deadline. That makes it your deadline."
yeah.
And he just lays it out for him. I was like, "Oh my god, what?" And like, it's just this dumpy middle-aged dude, and somehow he managed to convey this unbelievable, ridiculous level of threat that he can in no way back up. It's all a bluff.
well. I have to say too. Don't he is Robert Mitchum. I mean, that's don't be. It's like just to give background, like him as a person, not as a character of the story. I mean, he's someone who got kicked out of middle school for punching the principal, then started riding the rails for years, then became a professional boxer, then ended up in a Georgia chain gang, and
Okay.
It's
This is the hardest guy that ever lived. So
it's like there is every menacing thing. He basically can back up any threat that he gives.
Well,
So.
what's so fascinating about that is their first conversation is about how he got all of his knuckles broken, and like he completely got his ass kicked. But like when you think about it, when he's kind of, because he doesn't reference it in the second, but the second conversation is informed by the first one.
Yeah.
Because when he's talking in the second one, the thing that's the threat is the authenticity of the criminal world that he's this vital part of. Like he's part of it, or it's vital in his life. He's not really he's a small time player, but like it runs in his blood so deep that when he tells you that he knows people who will find you, you're like, oh god, he has to.
Yeah.
These are guys he plays poker with. I'm doomed.
Yeah, no, that scene. Number one, I like the dynamic between him and the guns dealer because it is this thing where I don't really understand how much Eddie Coyle is bluffing and how much he isn't, and how big he is and how big he isn't, because it seems to kind of fluctuate, and it's almost like there's a scene where his wife is like, "Oh, you're like the president of the United States. You're so important." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
It's a little unclear to like, how much of it is just like his perception of himself versus what's he's projecting versus what's the reality. But in that scene, I felt like what he was doing was he was kind of mentally dominating the situation, because he basically said to the guy, like, number one, he had the story about his hand, but the way he got into it was he's like, you know what he said, he like said something about his hand. He's like, it's a hand, and he's like, I hope you're not as, careless when you look at your guns as when you look at that hand, because there's a detail I want to tell you. I mean, that's how he said it, but that's, just the way he did that.
That's a really great way of presenting that too. I really liked that, where he's like, look at your hand, look at my hand. And he made certain that the guy like was, because he's a kid, you know, he's a twitchy gun dealer in his 20s or something. So like he's high strung and he's not paying attention to details. And he's like, look, I'm an older guy. I know the value of slowing down, and I'm going to teach you the value of slowing down by saying that I have twice as many knuckles as you. Here's why.
When he's also saying, I've been initiated and you haven't, is what I think. Like, I think he's saying, like, I've been through it and you haven't. And like, because in that scene, and when the guy's holding his hand, the guy's hand is kind of limp in that scene. Do you know what I mean? Look, you like, there's something about it where like, I almost thought he was going to say your hands are like delicate or something. Do you know what I mean? But he's just saying, no, I've had my hands crushed in a drawer and you haven't. And so,
well, there's an interesting juxtaposition between the characters, like, you know, like Coyle, where he's part of the old school, and you've got like this young gun dealer who's kind of more part of the 60s counterculture scene, along with those people who were trying to buy the guns from him and stuff. So you've got that interesting dynamic there.
And I didn't watch it twice. I only watched it once, but I watched the first 30 minutes a second time this morning just to kind of freshen up on it. And one thing I noticed that I hadn't in the first one was that the guy that he buys the guns from, the guy that the gun dealer buys the guns from, the druggy guy that he buys them from, says he's still writing. So he's obviously a writer. That was what he wasn't always in this criminal world. Eddie Coyle feels like he's long been in this criminal world.
That's all he can do. He doesn't know anything else. There's this, you know, it's like at the end, it's just there's the feeling he has no clue how to do anything but be a criminal. That's just outside his grasp.
And so you know that scene that was a really brilliant scene, I thought. I don't know, what about the other characters in the movie? Because I mean, it's about Eddie Coyle, but it's the friends of Eddie Coyle, and obviously it's kind of like, you know, what good friends he has, you know.
Sure.
What did you think of the other characters in the film?
I mean, where do you want to start? They're all pretty vibrant.
Who do you hate the most? Let's start there. Who's the most evil? Who's the most evil in this movie of all of them?
Oh, bartender,
the bartender's the most
no joke.
Peter Boyle.
What a rat that guy is.
You know what's funny? I agree with you 100%. That's exactly what I thought. But he's also not the guy that was like murdering people in bank robberies the whole time.
But he is, though. He's effectively getting people killed.
That's true. That's true.
He does arrange hits too. He's the one that sets up the whole hit on Eddie. So
but Eddie's a criminal. Do you know what I mean? What I'm saying is those bank robbers are killing innocent people. You know, not. You know, I mean,
but you get the impression this guy would have any. Well, the thing is, he's setting. I mean, Eddie is a criminal, but he's setting him up for his own crime. Basically, he's setting up to be killed for a crime. Well, also not a crime he committed. So it would be a crime within the organized crime world, but it's actually working with law enforcement. So, he's setting up his own friend or his friend to be killed. But also, was he? Do you think he set Eddie up on that truck thing that he got arrested for at the start of the whole background thing? Because that was the guy that sent him on that job, right? But what would that have been? What would the setup have been? I guess. Yeah, I guess it could have been a setup.
Well, he could have tipped off that guy or something.
Of course he did. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, he probably did.
And what that gets me thinking is the issue with Eddie Coyle is he's not that smart. Do you know what I mean? Because everybody else, as soon as they get arrested, like that, the guns dealer, he knows right away that Eddie Coyle set him up. Like right away, he's like, "Oh, that bastard." Eddie Coyle has no idea that Peter Boyle, I can't remember what is his name, Dylan. That Dylan set him up. He doesn't seem to have any clue, and that's what ultimately leads him to trust him enough to get shot by him in the end. You know, so.
What about the gun dealer too? I like his name too. It's Jackie Brown.
He's Jackie Brown.
Wow.
So I wonder if Tarantino watched this movie.
Yeah.
Seems.
Yeah, he was an interesting character, I thought, because he was like.
I really like that character. He is, he is very sharp, and he's a really hard character to pinpoint in a lot of ways. There's a lot of complexity there.
And it's Stephen Keats is the actor who plays him, apparently.
He had a good physical presence too, because he had a certain suaveness to his body language that's hard to like. I think you kind of have to either have that or not have it. Like Elvis sort of had that too, where there's sort of like there's certain poise, but also a certain kind of silkiness to the way he moves and the way he carries himself. It's an interesting confidence, and it really worked well to the character's advantage as well.
Yeah,
and I like how he's like when we first meet him, like we said, he's being sort of. He's like under Eddie Coyle. Like Eddie Coyle totally has upper hand in that situation. But then when we see him dealing with the guys in Rhode Island, I think it was Rhode Island, the guys in Rhode Island he's buying weapons from.
Yeah, he completely commands that situation.
Yeah.
Like he smells the trap, and really he smells a lot of traps.
Yeah,
he's only barely caught.
He's really smart. He's a really smart criminal, and it's just trusting Eddie that's kind of what gets him in trouble, really, right? Like otherwise he would have been fine.
So it's kind of interesting because I mean, it's like at the end of the movie, it's like, Eddie gets completely screwed over, but he just completely screwed over this guy in the exact same way, basically.
And he was going to completely screw over, what's his name? Scalise? Was that the bank robber?
Yeah, exactly. He was ready.
He did it too late, but he basically made the decision to do it. So
exactly. Yeah.
And also, the other thing I'm wondering about, it wasn't that long of a sentence. It was 3 to 5 years, right? That was So, I mean, it's not like they were putting him away for 20 years or 30 years. He had a strong possibility of getting back into society after serving his time, and maybe even having a shorter sentence, so.
Yeah. But I like you said, he's gone to jail before and he just can't do it again. He just kind of reached this point where it's like, no, like I said, with the kids too. I mean, you see the age of his children. I mean, it's it's being gone from kids for that long at that age.
But it's also interesting because like it taps into the whole Boston thing of not being a rat, not being a snitch, and he's being like a stand-up guy, and he does all that, but then he just totally backtracks on it through the rest. That's what the movie is about, is him basically backtracking on having not ratted out anybody, right? And so and I think that's kind of why it works, because it's like you said, it's like this slow boil where it's just like it's kind of like him slowly unraveling over the course of the movie.
Well, and it's interesting too, he gets killed for being a rat, but he didn't actually do that one. It's like he ratted someone out, then got killed for ratting out someone else that he failed to rat out. So
he got killed by the rat that ratted out. I mean, because Dylan was the guy who gave up Scalise, right? That's because remember he came in there and he's like, oh, somebody set him up, and then Peter Boyle did a really good job. Oh, go ahead.
How did those banks not compare notes? That was the third bank in the same area they were hitting in the same way.
Remember, I can tell you, before the internet, coordination between branches of businesses was non-existent.
Wow, dude.
No, it's more I could say off the air. But
also that the second robbery, that guy's like, look, this has happened to me 4 times already. Like, just do what they say, And there's that one guy that, like, I don't know, he just doesn't.
He pushes the button like an idiot.
Yeah,
and he does it in the most obvious way. That guy has the worst poker face.
I was really curious what was going through that guy's head, because obviously it panned out completely differently than he was picturing it panning out in his head. And I was like, what was he imagining was going to happen here? Well, there's a guy pointing a gun at you, and you press the button. I
also like how pressing the button that's hidden under your desk is such a trope that that they knew about it in the early 70s. Like a movie knew to tell the bank robbers to make sure they don't do that. It's just like, God, it's so tired. It's like, no one, everyone knows it's not hidden. Come on.
Well, but also I don't know. With the Peter Boyle character, I thought he just did a really good job of, I don't know, there was a sneakiness in his eyes that I really liked in the movie. It was like
Peter Boyle is just brilliant. Yeah. I mean, he is just such a good actor in anything he's done.
It was childlike. It was like this childlike quality where he's like, I haven't done anything wrong.
He has a complete lack of any guilt. It's like Coyle is at least carrying around some guilt about what he's doing, and he's agonized. It's like Dylan is just, I just sell people out. He just tells us, like the scene where he's been talking to Coyle and he gets the phone call and he's back there. Oh, can you believe it? He's over here talking about how bad he feels for these bank robbers, and it makes me so angry. And it's just so fake. So
I feel like he's the type of guy who believes his own lies. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, because there's even that scene where he's talking with the guy, the ATF agent or whatever he is, David Foley, and he says, he says, "Hey, I got a liquor license. I can't be going and doing this." He's like, "No, you work for a guy who has a liquor license that you never see." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I forget these things. I work for a guy who has a liquor license." That's what I was saying. And it's like, I just feel like he just is so. He's telling so many lies that he's just believing them all. Do you know what I mean? He's
just, well, yeah, you have those people where they just don't even care about truth anymore. So it's, I'm just a note, I'm relocating, so if I go quiet a second.
But yeah, and so I don't know, any other characters we want to discuss before we get into other topics, or are we good on the character thing? We haven't talked about Alex Rocco's Jimmy Scalise character that much, and who else? And we haven't talked about the ATF agent, David Foley, except peripherally. Hello? Oh, I'm not getting audio all of a sudden.
Are you hearing me?
No, I can hear
Adam. I can't
Adam.
hear Joel either. I think we lost Joel's audio.
Oh no, I'm muted.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Dear Lord.
So, you were trying to say something though, Joel, right? And
yeah. No, I was just saying that the ATF agent, like that guy, is only not a criminal because he's been legitimized by a higher authority. Because he's such a slime ball. Like he's constantly betraying Eddie Coyle and like stringing him along and clearly just ringing the guy out for all he's worth.
He has a criminal face too. Like they picked the right actor, because when they first introduce him, I thought he was another criminal. You know, I mean, obviously the location suggests that he would be a meeting with somebody like that instead of a criminal. But like, I was saying, oh, maybe this guy's like another criminal, and it took me a little bit to realize he was law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he looks a lot like the gun dealer too. I was messing him up for the first part of the movie, so like I think that was intentional.
Yeah, because he's got longish hair as well. So
the movie's definitely interested in the thin line between these, this policeman working with criminals all the time versus the actual criminals. And I mean, I think it's that with the final story at the end where Peter Boyle's talking to him. I feel that's kind of going along with that line as well.
I would really like to do Black Mass at some point, because I think like that would be a very.
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, that's an interesting.
I'd love to do that.
That's I read the book actually when it came out. We can get into that later, but like that whole idea of the thin line between, the law enforcement agent that's handling the informants and becoming a criminal yourself. That's I don't know. It's an interesting one. Adam, are you still there? It looks like we lost Adam, so it'll just be me and Joel.
Oh no, we're down on Adam.
Well, we'll Adam, I'm sure will return eventually.
Tragic.
Oh
man,
I'm back.
There we go.
Awesome.
All right.
Adam will return. Here I am.
You're just a disembodied voice right now, Adam.
I can see.
Okay. Let me.
Super high resolution face.
I cannot.
Can you see me now?
I can't, but I'll just listen. I'll just listen to your golden tones here.
Hang on. Wait, were you seeing anything or
no? But it might be more on my end than your end, so I don't think it's worth fidgeting over.
This is all gold. Keep it in.
So, well, we don't edit, so it's in. There's nothing. There's nothing. So I'm sorry, Joel. What were you saying?
Oh my God. There's a lot that this movie says about the legitimacy or lack thereof of police procedure. I'd like to point out especially the scene in which the gun dealer is dealing guns to the two hippies that want to rob a bank. And they keep, like the law enforcement is clearly bungling the situation, and they're like, okay, this guy's smarter than we thought he was. So they have this elaborate sting set up, and they're barely like hanging on by their toenails to getting him. And they let both of those people get away. So there's still these two violent criminals who are only a few machine guns away from more bank robberies that they didn't get.
Yeah, they were like
one guy.
They were like a hippie Bonnie and Clyde. That couple was really interesting. I liked that addition to the film, and I liked that they kind of got away, and you're able to imagine what's going to happen in the future with that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not only super ineffective, like it's all built off of the sleaze of the one cop who's just manipulating the hell out of Eddie Coyle and in no way giving him anything. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't give him any help at all, not even.
And I don't think he would have, even if Eddie had done all the things. I think he would have done the same thing to him, where he's like, "Oh, look, I talked to him, and the guy, he says, you really need to be doing more for Uncle." Like I just feel like I feel like he was just leading Eddie on, and Eddie was just not smart enough to realize that. Like he should have been like, "Look, give me something in writing," right? Like he should have said, "I can do this for you, but give me something in writing, give me something clear." So that I know that I'm going to be protected. And he wasn't doing any of that. And he's exposing himself to tremendous risk, which we see by the end of the movie. And the cop definitely doesn't care about him. The cop, at the end of the film, that last conversation at the end of the movie, the cop he's not concerned about finding out who killed Eddie Coyle at all.
No, he doesn't care. But yeah, I mean, interesting thing about this movie too is that even if Eddie had done everything right, he still probably would have been killed anyway, because the reason he got killed was just because Dylan set him up to take the fall. And it's like if he, basically because he never did, those guys don't care about the gun dealer. No one who arranges for his death even knows the gun dealer exists, for all I know. So yeah, it's an interesting thing that it's like he's basically doomed from the beginning of the movie, and every choice is just headed that path, whatever he does.
What's interesting is I feel like if this were made today, then it wouldn't have played, like, because it plays out, it's this long drawn out Eddie Coyle is going to get killed by this guy while they're in a hockey game thing. And the whole scene, I'm thinking, well, maybe Eddie's onto them and he's going to poison those beers that he's giving them. That's going to be the big, because I'm expecting this sort of like emotionally surprising. Yeah. Well, like the surprising thing that's going to happen that'll
it's a modern audience perspective. Yeah. Any modern movie would have put a twist in there.
Yeah.
This movie just deliberately plops it down and says, this is the mundane, depressing, pathetic reality. And I loved that. I loved that the movie was over. We knew everything that was going to happen. And the movie's like, but you're going to sit down and you're going to watch this pathetic guy get shot in the neck by his friend when he's asleep from beer and too much hockey in his car
from all
the game.
Alcohol he drank all day because he was despondent because he tried to sell out his friend too late. So
well, and I like that it's this inevitable bullet waiting for you. Know what I mean? It's just like there's something very, I don't know, very pessimistic about the ending.
It is. It's pessimistic and it's just miserable. And it's you're right. It's completely inevitable. And then when it happens, it's not like exciting. You're not like, you're just like, okay, get it over with. This is like shooting a horse that's been dying for a long time.
But also you kind of admire Eddie Coyle because he just gets drunk, goes to a hockey game, he falls asleep, and he gets shot in the head while he's sleeping. It's not like it's not super dramatic. It's not. No. It's not. He doesn't have a care in the world when he gets shot. There's.
It's something that feeds into something that was great about Tarantino movies when they came along. It's like you can have people be shot in a scene and it doesn't have to be an action scene. It's just boom, someone suddenly shot and they're dead. And that's it. Yeah. It's not an action scene. It's a murder. It happens and it's done.
yeah, that is that kind of scene. It definitely is. And it's similar in that it happens in a car to what happened in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of those scenes in Pulp Fiction, but I'm thinking of the one with John Travolta,
almost every death in Pulp Fiction was kind of matter of fact and a little bit pathetic. When I'm thinking about Pulp Fiction.
Well, my favorite one is when Samuel L. Jackson shoots the guy on the couch. That was the that had the best rhythm and quip to it. It was very funny.
Sam completely dominates that scene too. Yeah. Holy crap, that's a good scene.
Yeah. But this was a really interesting ending, and at first I was kind of resistant to it. I was just happy. I was thinking, no, he needs to stop this from happening.
You want some kind of justice for Eddie, even though he's a bit of a fink. He's a likable character. He's a family man.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's, like I said, he doesn't even know any world outside of this organized crime that he's in. It's like he doesn't know how to function out of it. It's like the idea, the cop kind of has that conversation. It's like, you've made all these choices. The only one messing you up is you. And it's like, him going straight or anything just isn't a possibility in his mind. he's kind of stuck there.
And it's just this quick death where it's just, I mean, death is just like, I don't know, it isn't dealt with in a weighty way. It's just like, no, death happens.
No.
Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of a thing where it's like, yep, that's how life works. You die sometimes, and Eddie Coyle gets killed, and the world is clearly moving on. You know what I mean?
It doesn't try and play it for any additional tragedy. Like we don't cut to his wife getting the news or anything. It's like that.
The movie has no interest in the fallout. No. And you know she's Irish. She cried her eyes out. Like that had to be terribly tragic. But like the movie treats it as a matter of fact thing. Like, yeah, that's just this world.
Yeah.
Well, it just cuts the last scene is just to show us how disinterested people are in the details of his death. You know, it's not significant to them after that. You know,
which also goes back to why the cop. You know, you're saying the cop was never going to help him. It's like Eddie the cop doesn't even really care about him much. It's like, yeah, I guess that gun dealer, but he's not interested in him as a long term. You know, I mean, if he thought he actually had any long-term value, yeah, he'd be protecting him. But no.
Yeah, there's no benefit to the cop.
He gets this little nugget from him that lets him get one more bust.
Well, basically everyone uses Eddie for that. Yeah, he's a nugget that gets one more bust. He's a nugget that gets the heat off the guy that actually sold out Scalise. You know.
Yeah.
That's his life. Other people use him as a tool, and then eventually, when he's no longer useful, they just discard him. It's sad and it's pathetic, and I love it. I love that that's what this movie is about.
So one thing I want to talk about too is the Boston stuff, because it's obvious.
Yeah, get into the Boston stuff. Boston.
So Adam, you had mentioned Whitey Bulger, and I did take a time to sort of look at.
I'm not sure on that. I just have a vague recollection.
So in the Wikipedia entry, at least, it does say that Mitchum was he wanted to meet Whitey Bulger as part of his research, but some guy from the Herald was like, "No, you don't want to do that." So, which is probably wise. So they introduced him to Howie Winter of the Winter Hill Gang instead. And the guy who introduced him,
if there's any movie star who'd be okay with meeting Whitey Bulger and not having a problem, it would probably be Mitchum, but still.
Well, and here's the interesting thing: Alex Rocco, who apparently grew up in Somerville, which I didn't know, is the person who introduced him to Howie Winter.
Okay.
So that's pretty interesting, I think. So my thoughts on the Boston thing. Number one, this movie's set in the South Shore. I'm on the North Shore. The South Shore is like Shelbyville to me. Do you know what I mean? It's the complete opposite end of the earth. I've never taken you to the South Shore, Adam, when you've come here.
And you never will.
I never will. I never go there. Like the first, I've gone to Quincy. That's about it. Do you know what I mean? But what I liked about it was it wasn't like I saw The Departed again not too long ago, and one of the things I was trying to look for when I watched it this time was the Boston stuff. And one of the things I noticed was it was kind of done almost like and maybe this is me projecting bias onto Scorsese, but I felt like it was Boston through the lens of a New Yorker. Do you know what I mean? Where it was almost like he was trying to make it look like New York. He was finding the things that you would find exciting if you were doing a movie about New York. But like Bostonians don't care about Boston. We go out of our way to avoid being in Boston. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's like when you live in Chicago, you don't spend all your time in the Loop.
Yeah. So this is like, no, we're at a bank. Like, we're not in Boston. We're like in, I don't know where it was, but it's like, it's like a suburb or like an area just outside of Boston. And it's all like the basic distinction is, can you park or not, right? Like they're in a place where there's parking. Do you know what I mean? And so therefore it's a place that's comfortable and easy to drive around and easy to do things in, versus being in Boston being super stressed. So I like that it was sort of focused on those kind of things. I also like that it was just really, it was giving us mundane sort of shots of the less clean parts of Boston. Do you know what I mean? It
looked, as someone that visits the city regularly, I was just like, this just feels like boring ass parts of Boston you just drive through on the way to someone's house. And that was all it was showing. And it felt authentic to me.
Because the boring ass stuff is that's where I spend most of my time. I spend
Exactly.
90% of my time in the boring places. So like in the scene where they get to the
malls.
well, like when they go to the bank parking lot and there's that wooden fence and like they're really focusing on the car. Like I've been in so many parking lots like that where I just had to stare at a fence for 30 minutes waiting for something. You know what I mean? It's just like that kind of thing where I was like, that's an authentic Boston fence with like the red brick bank house and like all the, like that all looks real and legit. You know what I mean? And
no, it is funny how places have like there's things you like this type of fence. Like there's certain type of fence I only see in Sydney, and it's like anytime I see that fence anywhere else, I'm like, oh my god, it's a Sydney fence. What's going on here? But,
they got all that 100%. They got I don't know. They got the right mixture of types of places in it. Like it was just I don't know how to put it, but it's just like you like okay. Here's the shot of the rich guy's house. Here's the shot of like the blue collar guy's house. Here's the shot of the criminal who's got a lot of money, but he's living in like a shitty place because he doesn't want people to know he has a lot of money type of thing. It just, I felt like I got a really nice cross section of residences and areas. And there were shots of like a few key places in Boston. Like I think they did City Hall Plaza and things like that. There was a couple of subway shots and things, like some of the T entrances on the surface, and but for the most part they weren't overwhelming you with that stuff. It wasn't like some movie set in New York where they show you Times Square because it's New York and they want you to know that you're in New York. Do you know what I mean? They didn't do that.
They did the flyover at the beginning and the end.
And,
they did a flyover at the very beginning. And they did a fly out at the very end.
Yeah, you saw the skyline. You saw the skyline, right?
It was almost like getting on a plane and going to Boston and just chilling out with your friends and going to their haunts, seeing a hockey game, and leaving on the same plane. Like that's what it felt like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did like that they did like the Boston Garden with the hockey. I think, and I'm not a big sports guy, so but that has a more I don't know that look. I thought that was an interesting choice for the final scene, right? Like it just worked better than if they had done like Fenway Park or something, something like that. I feel like a Red Sox game wouldn't have. I don't know.
Yeah, it would have been the same. It needed to be the hockey game.
Yeah.
There was almost something kind of like gladiatorial arena about it because it was inside, and there was concrete everywhere. And it just, I don't know, maybe that's a normal-sized hockey rink. It looked really small from where they were sitting. Maybe that's the most authentic
I mean, Boston
experience.
Garden was always kind of a crappy, like...
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the gladiatorial thing. I mean, as far as artistic flourishes, it did feel like there was some juxtaposition between the violence of the game and just the threat of them killing him. I kind of felt like there was some juxtaposition going on there. But...
it also seemed very much like a hockey game, though.
But it was interesting. I mean, it was kind of cool having that scene too, because like being like a Bobby Orr game, it's like even someone that plays no attention to hockey at all, it's like that's still like, oh wow, that's a name I actually recognize from hockey. So felt like it kind of captured something interesting there.
No, and I did like the violence going. It is like a more, like Joel was saying, it's a more combat oriented sport, and we got to see some of that in it. And so that kind of, I don't know, that added something to the scene. And also like, I feel like I don't know, I meet a lot of people that did hockey growing up. I never did hockey. I know nothing about hockey, but I'll always be surprised. Like I'll have a friend who like, I don't think of as like a person that would play hockey. Cause I imagine them being like, I don't know. I mean, it's a really rough sport. But a lot of people ended up playing hockey that surprised me. So I feel like it's a, I don't know, it's a very sort of Boston type sport. Do you know what I mean? It's a Celtics game or a Red Sox game would have been too on the nose, but a Bruins game is a little bit more. I don't know. It's kind of a nice choice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's another one of those things that has that kind of boots on the ground vibe that this movie did really well. Where like you're not showing off Boston, you're really kind of just on a walking tour of what you'd really see if you went over to visit a friend in Boston. There's some, it adds to that authentic feel. So, yeah, that was really nifty. And again, I think it contributed to the fact that my friends were falling asleep and bored to tears because if you go to like almost every place is like that. Like you see like the glamour shots in movies, and you go there and it's just like you said, you're staring at a fence, waiting in line somewhere.
I've always liked to do it that, like, because my feeling is if you go into a place and you go to all the sites, you don't actually see the place. Like I went to, like I haven't really visited that many places, but I went to Venice once for a week, and I had the option of doing a tour of Italy or doing a tour of Venice or whatever. And I was like, no, I'm just going to go to a hotel and I'm going to hang out for a week in Venice, and I'm going to go to like little coffee shops and churches, and catch like little performers, like like musicians at the like
people
shops.
outside of Venice know the name of the place. I'm gonna avoid it.
And that was, I thought that was like a more interesting experience, and I think that's what this movie is like. It's you're seeing it more like from a person who lives here than from, okay, we're gonna go to Faneuil Hall, and then we're gonna go to like the Freedom Trail, and we're gonna go to like all the places that you need to go in Boston to say that you've been here. And and they did show places, but a lot of the places I was like, it wasn't even like they didn't, like when they were like, I think at one point they might have been in Boston Commons, and it wasn't even completely clear to me that they were in Boston Commons because they didn't give it like the full, do you know what I mean? They didn't capitalize on the fact that, and I don't know if that's where they were, because I was a little bit I was really focused on the conversation.
Sign out front and doing an establishing shot and all that.
Yeah.
Well, Boston Commons. And no one actually wrote anything witty about it in the dialogue. There's so much shit like that in movies nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think it's because Tarantino did it so skillfully that no one does it skillfully now, but everyone does do it now, where someone will put that self-aware, we are now in Boston Commons. They shot this very famous movie scene here, thing that they're saying in their dialogue in the stilted, completely insanely unnatural way. God, I get sick of that shit. And I love in this movie, you don't even know if that's where they are. We sincerely don't know.
No,
that's where they were.
And that's where the South Shore thing really threw me off a lot, because at one point I was like, wait, are they near Revere Beach?
South Shore?
Yeah, they're on the South Shore of Boston in this movie.
Yeah, but the way you said it was the most Boston way I've ever heard anybody say it.
What did I say?
South Shore.
No, I didn't. I said South Shore.
Yes, you did. Adam, back me up.
I'm not.
I mean, this was recorded, so we can check.
It was one word. It was South Shore. Oh God, folks, back up and listen to him say it. It's beautiful.
Well, about the accent, because I was talking to you guys about this before the podcast. I was actually thinking of getting a line of the dialogue from the coffee house and having my mom read it, and then doing a clip of the guy do it, because I wanted to show you guys the difference between a real, authentic Boston accent and someone doing one. Now, I thought that Mitchum did a great job. Most of the people did great jobs. The accents, even if where they weren't perfect, like the sounds of the voice were really good. They just felt like authentic Bostonians somehow. But where I really saw it is, I think at one point Mitchum said personal, and he tried to drop the R on personal or whatever the word was with the ER. And it really stuck out. I was like, oh, I don't think that's because when I first saw him, I was like, oh, is Mitchum from Boston? Because he kind of had the voice and he seemed to be doing it. And then he says personal. I'm like, oh no, I don't think he's from Boston. Like that definitely sounds like somebody putting on an accent. But for the most part, I thought the accents were fine. It's a hard accent to do. But I did want to make that point that the R is not something that is always dropped. It's only dropped for certain words, usually words that end in an R with like an A before the R or something. Do you know what I mean? And there are times when there's a lot more nuance with the R dropping. And I think that's when you can really tell. And also just it's not just dropping your R. There's other vowels that are pronounced differently. But overall, I thought this. I mean, I've heard that it's the most authentic Boston crime movie, and I've seen, I think, all the other Boston crime movies, and this one is. I mean, this is. I need to watch Gone Baby Gone again, because I've always felt that even though that one's kind of a heightened reality movie, that one always felt pretty authentic to me in a lot of ways. I
haven't seen that actually.
I mean, I haven't seen it in ages, but I always felt like it was. It's heightened reality, so it's not as gritty and ground level as this movie, and there's stuff in there that is sort of made up to make it interesting, but
not many movies are as grounded as this movie. There's plenty of grounded movies that aren't as grounded as this movie, that's for sure.
But that one always felt like, of all the Boston movies set in Boston, to me that was the one that kind of felt the most authentic. But I don't know. I feel like this is definitely probably the most authentic. Like I have to agree with that consensus. Just watching this movie. Also, this is a movie I really want to see again. Like one of my regrets this week is that I didn't have time to watch it twice, because I really felt that number one, I wanted to see the movie again, but it would really benefit from 2 or 3 viewings. I'd get a much better sense of because there seems to be a lot of nuance in this storyline.
There's lots of subtle things going on in the background, definitely, or people are kind of talking, things that aren't even especially plot relevant. But because it's almost like there are multiple stories going. You could make a movie about the bank robbers, you could make a movie about the cop, you could make a movie about the gun dealers. Kind of all these, those hippie characters. I mean, there's a lot going on here in this movie.
Well, it's this movie is really dense, almost to the point of being impenetrable, because there is so much going on, and there is such a enormity of like really small and extremely subtle details, and none of them, almost nothing in this movie draws attention to itself. There's almost no spectacle to this at all. It's so, and it's not monotone. It's just like these deep, somber, subtle tones. It's a dirge of a movie, and it's a really dense, thick dirge. Yeah, definitely. It bears repeat viewings, because like things don't stick out to you the first time you watch it. Things like, you're still doing writing, that little scene, that little moment in that scene that tells you so much about these characters without really even having to say anything at all. It's like this guy's a failed artist, and now he's addicted to drugs, and he's kind of falling into this life of crime out of desperation. That guy's in one scene in this movie for like less than 5 minutes, and you feel like you've read a novel about him. The whole movie's like that. It's really something.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I mean, to compare it to a movie that's stylistically nothing like it, Miller's Crossing is also similar, where there's just so much going on in Miller's Crossing. I've watched that movie since it came out in the theater, and every now and then I'm like, oh, I find some little detail in there. I mean, that's a much more cinematic, over the top movie, but there is a real dramatic groundedness to it.
That would be another good one to do.
I would love to do that. I was on the fence when I made my proposal. I thought, I want to recommend that or Miller's Crossing. Those were my 2 top votes.
I've heard good things about Miller's Crossing.
Oh, you haven't seen Miller's Crossing?
I haven't seen Miller's Crossing.
If not, we must review that one. That is an amazing movie.
The crime movies I have seen that made me fall in love with the genre, obviously Godfather was the first one. It's gigantic. I saw Godfather and Godfather Part 2. I only kind of watched a little bit of Godfather Part 3.
I've seen the whole thing. It's not really anything to write home about.
It seemed a little weird. The first.
Do you want to know what happens at the end? Do you want to know what the ending is? Like,
what's the ending of Godfather Part 3?
His daughter dies. She gets caught in the crossfire, and it would have been really dramatic if they had Winona Ryder in it instead of Sofia Coppola. But history is written and it's not going to change. So
that's unfortunate. Yeah, man, they had Winona Ryder lined up for it.
She was supposed to play that character.
We need deep fake Winona for Godfather Part 3. That's going to be
wow. Yeah, she would have been great.
It would have been much better. It would have, because like Sofia Coppola is a great director, but that movie does not benefit from her presence in it, and also it's not a really it just doesn't match the first 2 movies. Number one. One of the reasons why Part 2 is so good is because the original book that The Godfather was based on, which I think was probably written for the movie before it came out. Like, I think it was one of those. I think it was one of those type of things. But that book had the storyline for the Marlon Brando character, for Vito, in his that whole flashback stuff.
Yeah,
that was all.
Vito's backstory was really, really good.
Yeah, and that was in the original book. So I think.
It's hella good. Too.
So I feel like that's one of the things that really made Part 1 and 2 work. Do you know what I mean? And Part 3 was just like, I don't know.
It felt like another different movie.
I've forgotten when Part 3 came out, but it feels like there was a longer gap too. When you have that longer gap between a movie and its sequel, it's really hard to get the same.
It's just kind of coming back for the paycheck when you got that long gap.
So anyway, I've seen those 2 movies and I really liked those. I saw Goodfellas, which blew me away.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite movie, hands down.
I saw Casino. Casino was really good. Let me see. It's Goodfellas.
That whole list Brandon put together is good. There's nothing on there I wouldn't want to watch again. So
let me see. What is the one? Casino was really good too. I want to say, was Goodfellas the one with the guy who was like, and I'm not going to narrow this down, who was selling all the cocaine, and then at the very end of the movie, he goes in the witness protection program. Is that okay? I thought so, because I'm bleeding together with Casino in my head, which was very had a lot of similarities.
He wasn't throughout the movie. He's not selling cocaine, but by the end, that's one of the things he's doing, and that's what he gets.
Yeah, he's constantly. Because as I recall, because I also saw a movie when I was a kid called My Blue Heaven, which
that's based on the same material,
later, right? Which is the same dude. Like that's the sequel to.
That's what we should do. We should do a Goodfellas, My Blue Heaven duo. Yeah.
Yes.
Because
great idea.
They're both based on. I guess what happened was Henry Hill had written or had done Wise Guys with Nicholas Pileggi. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. And one day he called, and Nicholas Pileggi's wife answered the phone and was talking to Henry, I think, and got a lot of. This is a story I heard. I don't know if it's true, but I heard that she was also getting information from Henry, and she wrote My Blue Heaven based on it. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's definitely based on like the same source. And it's so funny that you have like a movie with Steve Martin based on it versus this. It's just like a, one's so serious and one's so silly.
They're both such good movies in their own way too.
Yeah.
Interesting and unexpected sequels: Goodfellas and My Blue Heaven.
Yeah, I haven't watched any Steve Martin movies in a while, so that.
Steve Martin,
what a tragedy.
Yeah, Steve Martin's probably one of my favorite actors to watch.
Yeah,
he's a watchable dude. That Steve Martin.
So I'm sorry, but you were saying that. So you'd seen Goodfellas and.
Yeah, I think that's it though. I don't have like the most amazing education when it comes to crime movies. So this is one of the ones that's kind of out, like way off the beaten path.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it doesn't necessarily, like when you watch The Godfather, it's clear you're watching a work of art. There's something almost classical about the way it's constructed. And like there's really powerfully character-driven performances in Goodfellas and Casino. Right? But like this movie had something different. It was it had that same kind of world and the same sort of characters, but it had this wonderful morose realism about it that was incredibly interesting to watch. And I say incredibly interesting in that it did everything it could to smack any attention I could have given it away and say, no, you have to try harder to enjoy this.
Yeah.
This was the dark amber brew of crime movies. So I was like, oh God, it's like drinking water from an old reservoir filtered through an older sock.
Well,
but then you start getting the nuance and you're like, actually give me another one of those.
Well, I don't know. I'm a little confused by that analogy, but I think it's definitely you have to pay attention to the dialogue. The dialogue is not always easy to pay attention to because it's very.
Oh no, I got it. Okay, so The Godfather is a rich, well-aged red wine. Goodfellas and Casino. Those are mixed drinks, like cocktails. They're really, really good. This was an incredibly old aged, like bourbon or whiskey. So much so that it almost feels like getting punched in the mouth when you get it. And but then when it's
like
sort of
a rusty nail.
Well, and bourbon straight was his drink, right? That's what he drank when he went for his meeting. Straight bourbon.
This movie is bourbon straight. It's old bourbon. It's like hickory cask aged. So you need to work to enjoy this movie, but you will enjoy it if you get the taste for it.
Okay, that's a fair. Now that's much better. I'm much more happy with that.
I had to workshop it in real time, but I think that evolved really rapidly.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, like, well, at what point could you start tasting the nuances of sock water? What's the?
All right. Sock water's so delicious. You guys don't know. You haven't refined your sock water palate.
But yeah. So I don't know. I really did enjoy this movie, Adam. I had a wonderful time watching it, and again the Boston stuff was, I really loved it. You know what it's like? It's like when you first wake up in the morning in a place and go to the side of the road to like get the garbage. It's like that level of reality is what that's the authenticity that you're getting with this movie. It's like the walk to your trash on garbage day, which there's a scene of in the film. But it's just really, it's like, those shrubs are all 100% right for that neighborhood.
Yeah. It's like in Chicago, for example, almost every block has this back alley cutting through the middle of the block, which is this thing which is so Chicago, but you never see it in a Chicago movie. And it's just anytime you do actually see it in a movie, you're like, wow, that's where I actually live.
And
they've actually been to Chicago. It's not just Ontario again.
They didn't rent the same stock footage for the shot, like you say, and shoot the rest in Toronto. But,
And again, the South Shore thing did throw me because South Shore and North Shore like mirror images of each other's off either side of Boston. And so when they were by the water, I was like, oh, I think that's Revere Beach for a little bit. I'm like, oh no, that's got to be something on the South Shore. That can't be Revere Beach. So it's just, I found that part a little disorienting, but only because, it's on the opposite end of where I am, which I think again speaks to kind of, it definitely was familiar.
The mirror boss.
Yeah, but it was familiar enough that it was like, yeah, that's
That's an evil version of you over there with a mustache.
Yeah, there's the South Shore version of Brendan with the evil goatee version of me. So
he's a YouTube content creator. He makes video games.
So, but yeah, but yeah, I like the movie a lot. And I thought the performances were tremendous. The
cast in this is so good. Like I say, Peter Boyle and Mitchum are just both actors I could just watch in anything. I mean, they're just
and
so
this would have been an easy movie to like. You almost want to eviscerate it because of the pacing. You know what I mean? It's like you want like it would be.
Yeah,
you could just
critical complaints about the pacing when this came out, but it's like.
But it works.
So
it
does.
You'll be just as bored as if you actually went to Boston.
Well, it just wins you over by the end. It's like once you settle in, it just works. I don't know how to put it. It's kind of a hangout movie in that respect, I guess.
Yeah, it's once you start caring about things that are happening, you start paying attention. Like it can be a little hard during that initial bank robbery scene because you're not quite sure who the characters are. That's probably the hardest part of the movie to get to. But even on the second viewing, you already care, so you're already into that scene.
And that bank robbery scene did feel like the most stylized scene to me, with like the guys all wearing the same mask, and there's a bunch of shots of them all looking in the same direction. Do you know what I mean? And things just kind of like, But because I remember when you first mentioned it, I went and looked at the trailer, and the only thing in the trailer really, for the most part, there are other scenes, but they really emphasize that first bank robbery, and it makes it look.
Seen the trailer.
Well, it makes it look like a highly stylized film. Do you know what I mean? That's almost got this weird comedic edge to it, and the real movie's nothing like the trailer at all. So, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I don't think the trailer knew how to sell the movie, because I watched that too.
A hard movie to sell.
Wasn't it a weird trailer, Joel? With like,
It was weird. It was like, they only know this world of crime and everything really sucks. And like, that's as close as they can get to a selling point. They're just like, it's sleazy, I guess. You guys like sleaze, right?
Yeah.
This is back before studios had their act
I really wish I had like one of my Irish friends on here to get their perspective, because I feel like there was something also distinctly Irish about the movie. Well,
I mean, I'm a little Irish. I gotta say.
No, but I mean like Boston Irish. I mean like the Boston Irish people.
You're not Boston Irish.
I'm not the correct variety of Irish, but I gotta tell you, there was a lot of familiarity in that household. Like the attitude between him and his wife. Where like there's a sort of warmth and a playfulness, but all they do is insult each other whenever you're just listening to what they're saying.
Yeah,
there's something about the tonality, how the insults are going down, that is sweet, but they are only insulting each other, and that's a very. I don't care what part of Ireland you're from, even if you're a diaspora Irish like me, it's just a thing that's genetically encoded into us. That's how we communicate. Our love language is insulting each other all the time.
Yeah, I had an Irish grandmother, so I can.
There you go. If she ever said a kind word to you, it was by accident.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that his wife. I guess the actress is like Scottish or something, but I think she's supposed to be Irish in the movie. I'm not good with picking up on those accents.
She does look more Scottish than Irish, honestly, in my opinion. And I'm also a quarter Scottish, so.
But it was interesting that his wife was clearly from Ireland and he wasn't. Like he was Irish and from Boston, and she was. I liked that. I don't know, that it kind of suggests like this ongoing connection to Ireland, which is real. Like there is definitely a Boston Irish connection, and you don't have quite as much of that with the like Italians in Boston. Do you know what I mean? Like I've been to Italy once, and but there's not like it's not like there's like a. I feel like the line of communication is not as has not survived as long for But yeah, so I thought that was interesting. But Joel, did you think that the pessimism of the ending, did that feel like it fit with that too? Do you know what I mean? Was that like the just the sort of, I don't know how to put it, but just like the way that it just kind of, this is inevitable, and there's really nothing that's going to be done to avert what happens. Do you know what I mean?
It feels like an Irish novel, honestly, because Irish novels are kind of about that same. They're miserable, right?
Yeah.
But like they take such a stroll through the misery of life that they themselves are lighthearted. Eddie Coyle dies in a happy drunken stupor, so he dies like a noble Irishman, right? And yeah, it was inevitable, and yeah, it's miserable and pathetic. But when you really pull back and the broad view of all human nature, we really can't hope for much more. I mean, like,
I almost felt good for him that he went that way rather than got it in a bad way. Do you know what I mean? Like if he had known that he was about to die, that would have been worse, I feel. Do you know what I mean?
And he was too dumb and drunk to think he was going to get shot by his best friend in the throat. So, yeah.
But it was a really, really good movie, Adam. Definitely recommend it to people. I rented it on Prime. Sadly, a lot of movies are coming down from Prime. However, I have found the cache of like old wuxia movies and stuff that are still on Prime that haven't gone away. So,
that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, speaking of caches of just random stuff, guess who owned 8 Diagram Pole Fighter and didn't know it? My new girlfriend. So we just have a DVD of that now. I'm going to introduce her to it.
Did you see the 8 Diagram Bullfighter with us?
Yeah.
Or no? Okay.
You introduced me to that because it was that one guy's farewell performance. What's his name?
Oh, Alexander Fusheng.
Yeah, Alexander Fusheng. Oh man, and it's really good too. He really pours his soul into it. It's quite a performance. Yeah,
it's that cathartic scene in the where they're fighting in the tavern was really tremendous. I thought, that's a great movie. I love, and Cara Huey is in it. There's a Cara Huey movie on Amazon called Inspectors Wear Skirts, which is one of the first girls with guns. Well, it started this genre called girls with guns. And it's on Prime, so that might be one to consider doing at some point.
I think Bubblegum
I don't think I've seen that one yet, actually.
Oh, you have?
Cool.
It's an interesting one. It also has Cynthia Rothrock in it too.
Okay.
So
yeah,
and I think was somebody else famous. I forget. There's like another significant star in there. But anyways, we should probably end it because we've been going for like an hour now.
Yes, it's been a bit.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Yeah.
No, what were you gonna say?
I don't want to get as dense as the movie. I want to do one last put down before I leave, because I really did enjoy this movie, but it is pretty impenetrable. It's as dense and unyielding as a Bostonian brick, but just as satisfying to hurl into the face of people that aren't expecting it.
And they did do a good job capturing that red brick, the way that it's actually used. Not just like
the Alaskans up here were commenting on it because you can't have brick in Alaska. It's all
really?
Concrete. Well, because we have earthquakes up here. A lot of them.
Oh, bricks aren't good in earthquakes? Is that a...
Not at all.
Okay.
They are not. You need something yielding.
Boston
concrete.
had an earthquake in like the 1700s, and we're due for another big one. Like we do get them periodically. Yeah.
Not going to be a pretty time then.
No. But that's the good thing about living on the North Shore. We're all granite, and apparently we're going to be more protected.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm in California right now, and I'm at a house made of stone, so it's just built to withstand anything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of architectural brutalism up here, and I don't think there's any brick buildings. They were really good because I grew up in the Midwest, so I get to go to St. Louis pretty routinely. There's a lot of brick up there, and so brick is brick to me. But yeah, I was taking stock of the kind of architecture I've seen when up in Alaska, and it's pretty much concrete.
My grandfather grew up in a place called the Brickyard. That's
nice.
how, and he was a stonemason. So
jeez, most Bostonian man that ever lived.
but yeah, so we'll end it here, and we'll hopefully come back with another one of these where we talk about gangster movies. And until next time, we will talk to you later. All right, Ma, so can you just read what's written there for me?
You don't care about, you just want me to read the words. I don't have to, act it out.
No, you just read the words, but if you could speak a little loud so that it can pick up, that'd be good.
I'll do it now. I'm ready now.
Okay.
What makes it hurt worse? What makes it hurt more? Is knowing what's going to happen to you, there you are. It just come up and say, look, you made somebody mad. You made a big mistake. And now there is somebody doing time for it. Nothing personal in it, you understand, but it just has to be done.